I wanted to welcome you to today's webinar, ITIL 4, the changes, what's new, and how it impacts you.
Okay then, so ITIL 4, the changes, what's new, how it impacts you. So what I'm going to do is go through a whole host of things in the next hour or so, hopefully. As the first question you always ask when something like ITIL, or whatever it may be, updates is why. Now, there are a whole number of reasons why ITIL has updated. I'm going to pick on just a couple. One of them is this view that uh, the a view that's been carried forward really through ITIL 2, ITIL's version 2 into ITIL version 3, was that the relationship as far as value was concerned was pretty much one way, that the service provider provided value to the customer and that was it. And obviously if you look at Agile, if you look at DevOps and you look at their cultures, it is very much about that. ITIL version 4 is looking to step away from that a little bit and talk more about the idea of value co-creation through collaboration, and that's one of the topics that I'm going to touch on a little bit later. So there was certainly a reason to look at the whole idea of value creation and value co-creation as an update. But I guess if we're talking about one of the primary reasons for ITIL 4's update, it was that one about becoming agile. Make me agile. I want to be agile, and I want to be agile now. And many organizations saying that ITIL was very process based. It was that mighty Leviathan that wasn't being updated. It was slow, it was laborious, it was administratively heavy, and it needed to do something. Well, ITIL has got a long history of actually responding to change. Now, in its evolution, way back in the 1980s, we were thinking then, what does good look like? We knew how to we knew about processes, we knew about risk, and so on. And ITIL came about and was first published as a set of books, around 40 odd of them, 42, 43 books, in around about 1989. And that lasted. They were very, very functionally biased. So we talked about a capacity management function. We talked about a software control and distribution function. So ITIL then started to update, and it was 2000 when service support and service delivery and the whole ITIL version 2, which was very process focused, actually came out. And it was around about that time that ITIL started to crack North America, in particular after Enron and so on in sort of 2000. Then it really did make a difference to ITIL being embraced worldwide. 2007 saw the service lifecycle appear in ITIL version 3, and that moved things forward. And then we moved on with a 2011 version, when business relationship management, design coordination, and so on were added to ITIL for a 2011 kind of almost a mini edition of ITIL. In 2016, the guiding principles and ITIL practitioner came out. And then finally this year, we have the service value system, which we're going to look at in a little bit more detail as we progress through. My particular personal journey with ITIL started way back in 1996, when I first started using ITIL in anger at one particular organization, retail organization here in the UK. And I've had a whole host of different roles in and around ITIL, then as authoring work, as chief examiner for ITIL version 2, as an examiner for ITIL version 3, and I'm currently engaged in writing some of the practices for ITIL 4, in particular incident and problem management. So ITIL's been part of my life and a love of mine, which is very auspicious on this day today, a love of mine for a good number of years. So the service value system. This is basically an overview of where ITIL is going. Gone is the service life cycle of ITIL version 3 to be replaced by this service value system. And what we're going to do is look at the various components of the service value system in the next hour or so. The idea is that what we do is we go from opportunity on the left-hand side, or demand. So opportunity, it's a new opportunity for a service or an improvement, versus demand, where it's maybe a change, or we actually need some support for a service. So opportunity and demand, going through the service value chain, and hopefully at the other end we deliver valuable outcomes. Now, within that, we're going to look at 7 guiding principles of ITIL. They first featured in ITIL in the practitioner guidance in 2016, and they've gone down from 9 to 7. We've pushed a couple together and added one. So that's the guiding principles. We'll look at them shortly. Governance basically uses the same evaluate, direct, and monitor flow that it did in ITIL at version 3. We won't touch much on the governance in this particular presentation. The service value chain itself will look at the elements of the service value chain: plan, improve, engage, design transition, obtain, build, and deliver support. The practices, ITIL has lost its processes in favor of practices, and we'll explain some of the reasoning behind that decision, and the scary number there of 34 practices. We'll talk about why there's 34 a little bit later. And then finally, continual service improvement has moved to continual improvement, and we'll show you the updated continual improvement model of ITIL 4. So the service value system. First thing I'm going to do is look at the 4 dimensions of service management. Now, this is particularly important from a service management perspective. Sat in the center, value, products, and services. And the idea of the 4 dimensions of service management there: organizations and people, information and technology, partners and suppliers, value streams and processes, is that when we do anything with service management, be it designing or updating, anything to do with service, we take a holistic approach. Now, those of you that were familiar with ITIL at version 3 will probably remember, please say you do remember, the 4 Ps of service design. And that's where the inspiration and the idea of holistic service design has actually been widened and broadened to embrace the whole of service management, to make sure that when we design, when we update, when we deliver anything to do with services and products, that we take this holistic approach and that we don't miss anything out. A great example, and one that I use quite regularly, is it comes from the world of Formula One racing, where they can now change all 4 wheels on a Formula One racing car in something approaching 2.5 to 3 seconds. If you don't get the people, the technology, the partners, and the process right, then that 2.5 seconds suddenly becomes much, much longer. And the value for everybody involved, whether it's the driver who wants to win the race, whether it's the race car team that wants to win a title and get all the investment, whether it's the people in the stands and the governing body, the FIA of motor racing, and the value that they want to get. If that service doesn't work, then nobody gets that value. So this 4 dimensions of service management is now being pushed right to the very fore of service management. Now, around the outside are effectively the constraints and the dimensions that service management and indeed your organization must work inside. So the rules. Now, in ITIL at version 3, there was a really, really very powerful, perhaps from my perspective personally, the most powerful diagram in ITIL version 3 was designed by constraints. And this is effectively political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors. They are the constraints that service management must work within for it to deliver to the organization, to its users, to its customers, to its stakeholders. So if you've got to design a service, those constraints and those dimensions around the outside are effectively the shape of the piece of paper that we've got to design onto. So that's a very, very important element and has been really brought to the fore as part of ITIL 4 thinking. I also mentioned before value and value co-creation, and the definition of value is not changed. It's the perceived benefits, the usefulness, the importance of a product or a service. The idea of value co-creation, though, is a new one. And I use a non-IT example there of Lego, the building bricks that we may have played with as a child or our children perhaps play with. And the one thing about Lego, and one of the things they do, is they allow their customers, their stakeholders, to have a say as to what the next models are that can be produced by Lego as an organization. And they share in some of the success of actually doing that. So the value is created not just for Lego as a corporation, but also for the people who come up with the ideas, the customers who come up with the ideas. Because number one, not only do they get the value of seeing their idea actually become a Lego model, but they also get some sort of financial reward from that as well. And if you think about IT services and products, then actually making the products and services more effective and efficient, not only does that benefit as a stakeholder, the customer, but also benefits the service provider. And it might actually benefit other end customers as well that use our services. So ITIL's looking much more at this idea of value co-creation, which is taking things like Agile that look very much like value for the customer, just a stage further. The 7 guiding principles, anybody that studied ITIL's 2016 release of the practitioner guidance will have come across the 9 guiding principles. They've been condensed down to 7 now. Well, actually, they were condensed down to 6 and then 1 was added. And the idea of guiding principles in any organization is, they're not rules, but they are guidance to help you to stay on course, to help you to make decisions quickly. And they reflect an organization's vision, mission, and its values. I'll give you an example of number 1 there, focus on value. I said that I worked for a retail organization. That retail organization trades in the UK very, very heavily on having an ethical approach to everything that it does. So where it sources its raw materials and the items that it sells from, the suppliers that it uses, it's got a very, very ethical approach. So the idea of focusing on value for that organization as a stakeholder is in the ethical approach. That's their vision, that's their mission. So the principles are there to guide us. So focusing on value for stakeholders, starting where you are. The move from ITIL 3 to ITIL 4 It's not just a case of let's throw out everything from 3 and put it in play and put 4 in place. It's about actually start where you are. What have we got in 3 that we can use in 4? And certainly any introduction of new services, any introduction of new ways of working in an organization, if you've got something from the previous ways of working that worked, then it's a massive positive to start where you are in terms of getting people on side and with the any improvement that you're making. Progressing iteratively with feedback, absolutely stolen from Agile, but just as important in service management that you can progress iteratively. You're not waiting for maybe a single big bang launch. If you can make improvements, do so. If you can make small improvements, do so. Collaborate and promote visibility. Think and work holistically. Again, they're ones that are taken in terms of adding value, collaborate and promote visibility. Think and work holistically. We just talked about in the looking at the 4 areas of ITIL that we can that will help us to think and work holistically like that. Keeping it simple and practical, straight out of the lean playbook. And finally, optimize and automate. This is probably the new one, which if we think about organizations now looking at CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous delivery approaches, organizations using DevOps, more and more AI, becoming prevalent, machine learning in organizations, then certainly optimizing and automating. Many of you may well now work in organizations where you've got AI and chatbots doing the first line support for some of your customers. So it's not automate everything, it's optimize and automate. Intelligent automation is probably the way that I describe it. So the 7 guiding principles are there to help to guide us and keep us on course. Those of you familiar with ITIL 3 will recognize the continual improvement model. What we've done is we've actually made sure that there was a leap of faith in the old model between how do we get there and did we get there. There was actually a leap of faith that we actually did something in between those two. So it's been explicitly put in there now in the model to take action. This actually, though, this continual improvement model is a hangover right the way from the earliest days of ITIL. This continual improvement model. I've been using this on consultancy assignments for the last 17 or 18 years, and it's not let me down yet, this continual improvement model. So that's one little change to that, one little tweak to it. Which brings me to the service value chain, and this is the bit that's really replaced the service life cycle. And it's all about from getting that demand opportunity at one end through to value at the other end through the delivery and support of products and services. And the idea is that what you've got as a loosely coupled set of activities. There's no one route actually through the service value chain. The idea that they're loosely coupled means that there are many different routes perhaps through there. The chances are, I'm going to show you an example of this a little bit later, but engage is effectively engaging stakeholders, whether they be users, customers, sponsors, whoever the stakeholder might be. There's an engage activity. The plan and improve activities that run right the way through that probably speak for themselves, that obviously some activities have got to be planned much more than others. Let's say you engage, you want a fix of an incident. It's a very, very simple fix. You might go from engage straight to deliver and support, and you deliver value. Something much, much more complex could go through a number of iterations through here, through this value chain. Design and transition do pretty much what design and transition did in ITIL at version 3. Obtain and build is new to ITIL in some senses, in terms of it being specifically called out. ITIL never used to really talk too much about development or building and buying. It discussed it in service transition, but not too much. A little bit more of it in here. And then finally, deliver and support, when we actually put something into the live environment and we're there and we support it. So they are loosely coupled, and there's feedback built in at every stage. Now, one of the things that happened in the early stages of drawing up this service value chain amongst the architect team was that they tried to put all the feedback loops in there, and it kind of looked like a wiring diagram of the New York Metro when they'd finished. So they said, right, okay, let's just assume that there are lots of feedback loops in here, and that all the feedback is built in, because the feedback really will depend on what route you take through the service value chain to actually deliver a particular activity. So feedback's built in. It's guided and supported by the guiding principles. And perhaps the biggest change is that it's also supported by practices. Now, if you remember in ITIL version 3, the actual processes were embedded in service design. There were 8 in there, the 7 in service transition, the 5 in service strategy, and so on. None of the practices are embedded in the service value chain at all. They sit outside and you can use them at any stage. So they're almost like tools that help you to build and support the value chain. And as I say, example coming up after I've shown you what the practices actually are. So what is that practice? ITIL loves a good definition. A practice is a set of organizational resources designed for performing and so on, and accomplishing an objective. Now, if we think about something like incident management, incident management, ITIL version 3, that's one of the processes. Well, actually, if you think about what incident or change or problem genuinely was, well, it had defined outcomes and objectives, didn't it? It had CSFs and KPIs. There was a process. There were procedures within that process. There were interfaces to other processes. There were control aspects, particularly if you'd mixed ITIL and COBIT. No, I said COBOL then. That's going back a few years. ITIL and COBIT. There were organizations and structures and cultures around incident management. There were a whole host of skills and knowledge. It had its own information artifacts, the incident record, and so on. The technology, the relationships, the agreements. Incident management was a practice. Problem management was a practice. Change was a practice. So ITIL, rather than, if you look at that process, which was what we all thought that these things were, is actually only one element. Now, ITIL actually did talk about this in version 3, but they hid it very, very well and talked about competencies and having those competencies, and it didn't necessarily work so well. So you've got this idea of practices now, and I'm going to introduce a few of them to you. ITIL splitting them into 3. The first set are general management practices. So these are some of them you're familiar with on there that were in ITIL at version 3. So continual improvement is still there. Information security management, knowledge management, 1 or 2 little tweaks with the names. Portfolio management's broadened out from just service portfolio management. Service financial management is financial management for IT services, only with a new name. But what have they added? Well, one of the things that they've added is enterprise architecture management. Now, what they're not seeking to do is reinvent the wheel with the practices. The practices are going to, when the practices are actually delivered later this year in detail, the practices are currently in the ITIL Foundation level publication, but there's only a couple of pages on each at the moment. The more detailed are being written for release in H2 of this year, so probably sometime towards the back of the summer. What they're not seeking to do in enterprise architecture management is reinvent TOGAF, the Open Groups Architecture Framework, or any other enterprise architecture method. What they're looking to do is, how does service management interface with? So in a world now where we're having to work together and be more collaborative, what ITIL's trying to do is understand how other practices that are maybe on the edge of ITIL and on the outside of ITIL, how service management should be interfacing with those, not just the interfaces within service management. So enterprise architecture is up there as a new practice. Measurement and reporting, straight out of ISO 20000, is in there as a new general management practice. Organizational change management that was in the ITIL practitioner guidance in 2016 has carried forward, and it's very much about the people side of change management rather than the changing of the infrastructure. Project management, they're not seeking to reinvent PMI, whoever could. What they're looking for, again, is how does project management interface with IT service management and service management. Risk management, always been there as an undercurrent in ITIL, but never called out as specific practice. And so organizations would look around and would find management of risk, or look at other such practices to do their risk management. But there was never a lot of guidance on how risk management as a practice should have interfaced with service management. Hopefully there in ITIL 4 now, it's going to be there. And perhaps one of my favorites, I would say this, wouldn't I, working for a training organization, is workforce and talent management. The idea being that we prepare for the knowledge worker of the future. And in subsequent slides, I'm going to talk about the idea of the T-shaped individual in relation to service management training. Service management practices, the ones we'll know and love. One or two little name changes in there: monitoring and event management, capacity and performance management. So pretty much as they were, though. What have we got? Business analysis has made an appearance in service management practices. ITIL used to be very much about the warranty side of the delivery of services, the availability, the performance, the capacity, but it's got to be much more about functionality now. So it's not seeking to reinvent IIBA's business analysis best practice, but how does service management interface with it? Change management from ITIL at 3 has become change control for two reasons. First reason's a practical one. The organizational change management in the general management practices won the battle for the management word. And I think simply because ITIL 3's version of change management, where we talked about change managing the service portfolio, change managing the service, change managing service level agreements, change managing documentation, change managing structures, never really materialized. It was more about keeping, and organizations, it was more about keeping that gate on the live environment. So change control is where we've gone in the service management practices. Two have appeared there at the same time. So what was service asset and configuration management has split out. IT asset management, with very much its financial focus on IT assets. Service configuration management, supporting supporting service management practices, incident, problem, change, and so on. So they've split the two of those out there now. The final one in this particular group is service design. So it was an element of the life cycle, but called out as a specific practice in ITIL 4 to make sure that we have that holistic approach to the design of services, that we take into account the people, the technology, and so on. The last three practices ITIL has designated technical management practices. Deployment management, very much with the flavor of DevOps and continuous integration, continuous delivery in particular. Infrastructure and platform management into cloud information, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software development and management, Scrum, test-driven development, feature-driven development, whatever, extreme programming, whatever it is you happen to be using to develop software. Not to reinvent them, but how do they connect with ITIL and service management? So they're the practices. What I'm going to do now is give you a very, very short or half a story of how the practices are designed to interface with the service value chain that we looked at a little bit earlier. So if I am a customer and I have a need for some new functionality in a service, it could be that I've got that need, and that need is going to be needs to be looked at on a service basis. So it's not going to jump straight into an agile team and we'll have a minimal viable product in 7 days. It's probably going to take a little bit more planning than that. So the demand, the engage activity from the service value chain might well employ relationship management or service level management to understand, or business analysis, to understand what the actual demand is. That could then go to the plan aspect, where it could be portfolio management, service financial, enterprise architecture, that look at the viability of what the customer is looking for and is willing to pay for. So the whole idea of that is that what that does is they might well then go back to the customer through Engage and say, well, okay, yes, we can do that. That's what it's going to cost. It fits in with our cloud native enterprise architecture strategy, and we can move forward. That might then come back to plan, where it could be architecture, enterprise architecture, or project management that gets involved. That then goes through using the service design, maybe business analysis practices to moving through design and transition. Could well be then software development gets involved in obtain and build, deliver and support, incident, problem. Now, I think what you see there is a journey through the production of the service incorporates a hell of a lot more than ITIL ever used to. ITIL would have looked at it purely from the view of the service. It's looking now at a much bigger picture to not to replace things like enterprise architecture, but when do we get them involved? How do we get them involved in this bigger picture? And the latest publication that will hit the bookshelves and the bookstores on Monday of next week will show a number of examples of how to use the service value chain. One that you've probably already seen moving on is the actual certification paths through ITIL. and being released. You can take the courses at the moment. We're not running the exams themselves for ITIL Foundation are not available until the 28th of February. So we're running our first courses February 26th through to 28 to allow people on the 28th to become some of the first non-trainers on the planet to actually pass the ITIL Foundation. You might get certificate number 1. So the ITIL Foundation, some organisations offering it as a 2-day, some as a 3-day course. From a quality perspective, we've gone down the 3-day route, and I was very, very pleased that our instructor pool were 100% behind that when we talked to them last week about going down that 3-day route. But more of that, I'll not tell you that at this particular point. In H2, which probably is going to actually mean the back end of the summer, we're going to see the ITIL next level qualifications. Now, through the middle of that diagram there, the kind of jam in the jelly in the sandwich is the next level qualifications, and I'll talk more about those in a moment. The 4 on the left hand side would lead to somebody becoming an ITIL managing professional. That's a designation, not a course, the blue box there. The 2 on the right will lead to somebody becoming an ITIL strategic leader. If you notice in the middle there, the dark blue box, ITIL strategist, direct plan and improve is actually the same course. So if you pass that one when it comes out, you've got one half of what you need to become an ITIL strategic leader and 1/4 of what you need to become an ITIL managing professional. Now, there will be, for people who are close to getting their version 3 expert or who are already version 3 experts, released at the same time in H2 will be the ITIL managing professional transition, and that course will jump somebody straight into becoming an ITIL managing professional. Unfortunately, what it won't do is get you the strategic leader qualification. Still at the top of the certification path is ITIL Master. You will need to be both an ITIL managing professional and an ITIL strategic leader before you can go on and do your project and your dissertation to become an ITIL Master, if that's still a route that you actually want to go down. So that's the certification path, and I said I'd talk a little bit more about the certifications and particularly the mid-level ones there in relation to the value chain. Slightly different view of the value chain here, but it's easier for me to actually explain it. Now, what you see there is the value chain, and direct plan and improve. It will be absolutely no surprise to you. Will involve particularly the plan and improve areas of the service value chain. Driving stakeholder value, obviously engage is a big element of driving stakeholder value, understanding value, how to measure value, a big part of that particular qualification. Create, deliver and support is all about the creation of the deliver and support aspect. So it touches on design, transition, obtain, build, but focuses in particular on the deliver and support aspect of the value chain. High velocity IT is all about how do I get from one end of that to the other quickly, as the name suggests. So it will certainly be looking at aspects like DevOps in its view of the world when that one appears. And then finally, the digital and IT strategy. That one's going to look at the whole of digital and IT strategy, and certainly be looking at elements of IT strategy now that just weren't around in 2000 and 2006, probably 2005 when ITIL version 3 was being written. So that's where those qualifications are going to go, and there'll be more information about them as we progress through the spring and Axelos actually release it. All of this is being written at the moment, but we're all under reasonably strict NDAs that we can't say too much about them at the moment, simply because some of it hasn't been finalized. Now, I did promise you before that I'd look at the T-shaped individual and where ITIL 4 education is going and some of the rationale behind it. Now, hopefully, a lot of you have been familiar with this, that you've had hiring managers and you're looking now, particularly in agile environments, at this idea of the T-shaped individual, where they've got a discipline or speciality that they know about in some depth, but then their work and how they contribute to areas outside of their core area, they don't know in the same depth, but they've got a broad range of skills. Now, ITIL at version 3, the foundation didn't really cover too much outside of ITIL's core. And it went into a little bit of depth about things like incident and problem and service level management and so on. The ITIL intermediate qualifications, they went into the same kind of breadth, but a lot deeper in terms of the discipline or speciality. So if you did service operation, you got a lot of information about incident management, problem management, event management, and so on. Now, that caused an issue in my T-shape there. The first danger was the information that ITIL didn't tell you about capacity, didn't tell you about incident, didn't tell you about problem in the education. Now, the one thing about that gap and that danger down there, it was well served by organizations like HDI talking about the service desk, organizations like ITSMF and its conferences. And so it was actually a very, very well served area in terms of where I could pick up extra information. The massive danger was how service management people and ITIL interfaced with those areas outside of its core. Risk management. How did it interface with development? How did it interface with project management? How did it interface with enterprise architecture? And that was a bigger danger to your organization than the actual lack of depth that wasn't covered. So where's ITIL 4 going? Well, ITIL 4 Foundation, simply by its nature, is covering a much greater area of how ITIL contributes and works outside of its core area. But it's also at the next level, and this is one of the views of the next level. It's not been totally finalized yet, but this is where a lot of the thinking is going, that information at the next level of qualifications is actually going to span the same sort of breadth, but the depth of it isn't going to be as much as you were expecting from ITIL version 3. Now, okay, that leaves a big danger, but isn't that the big danger that was very, very well served already by organizations like ITSMF in the USA, by organizations like HDI in the USA, ITSMF globally, SDI, Service Desk Institute in the UK. So that's actually still going to be very, very well served. And the area that wasn't as well served, we've actually shrunk that. And if we're going to be collaborative in organizations, that's where the education really does need to focus. And that's been a lot of the focus of the type of education message that we in Global Knowledge have been pushing for the last 3 or 4 years, that it's that breadth of education and how to contribute and work outside of your core area, that's the real growth. And that's where ITIL 4 education is going to have its focus. You'll still be able to be educated in the depth of the disciplines, but it won't necessarily be exam courses, and more likely to be bespoke and tailored for your organization. And I think that's a massive, massive move forward that is going to benefit a lot of people. So where do I think that we should be starting? So if your organization's never seen ITIL before, then where have you been? No, but genuinely, ITIL 4 is a reasonable starting point if you haven't. If you have been heavily invested in previous versions of ITIL, take a step back and think about it. Chances are you'll be using a lot of ITIL 3 language, tools, workflows that are based around the V3 service lifecycle. You can't suddenly start speaking 21st century English in ITIL 4 to an organization that's speaking the equivalent of Yoldi 17th century English perfectly. You can just about understand each other, but it might well be that there's the propensity in there for miscommunication, lack of clarity, etc. Particularly if you've got junior and senior people who are trained at different levels, that might be dangerous, and the whole thing can go west. My view is, my advice and Global Knowledge's advice is to get your IT service management strategists to look at 4. Decide whether the changes justify the risk of swapping straight over, or you need something more measured. Indeed, following one of the ITIL principles, iterative with feedback. So that would be certainly my advice on switching your training, and to have a more detailed call, then certainly contact us directly. So my final slide, just to give us a little bit of time to ask some questions. ITIL hasn't talked so far in ITIL 4 about organizational setups. So what I'm going to do is give you a view of the world and where some of the thinking is going about how service management and ITIL might well contribute moving forward. And this is going to be based on the type of structure that you might see in organizations that are now starting to adopt very product focused delivery and having separate product teams using very agile approaches. You've still got users and customers consuming services, product teams building those services. They're deploying their products onto platforms. So we've got infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, automated provision. We've all gone mad. We've gone out, we've bought Docker and Kubernetes and so on. And we've got this in place. And it's all driven by our organization's enterprise governance, which is laying down the policies and the guidelines that are coming from areas like legal and finance and HR. Now, I'm going to add 2 different areas to this. You don't, the decision about whether you go infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, what tools you use, that really does need to be part of your architecture strategy, which will feed into and will definitely feed into the platform team, the product teams, and will help them to become those self-sufficient, automated, self-governing teams that they dream of when they go on their first Scrum course or their first Agile course. Now, the other thing that happens, though, change control doesn't disappear. Release management doesn't disappear. Configuration management doesn't disappear. Incidents still happen. Things still fail. Organizations still look at having service targets. Organizations still have to think about capacity. Oh, you're saying, Barry, service management's quite important. Yes. IT service management can certainly help all of those teams, platform teams, product teams, to become far more agile, service management can help them to become to actually have that automated governance, to have that control over their own destiny that they always wanted to have. Because DevOps and so on doesn't tell you how to do release management and configuration management. Scrum doesn't tell you how to do incident management. They're all embedded within service management. So certainly you can see a role for a service management office in an organization, helping to define how service management's going to be embedded in platform teams, in product teams, through to users and customers. And I'm certainly seeing in some of our customers in the UK at the moment that this sort of thing is starting to happen, where CAB meetings have disappeared in some organizations, replaced by people who lay down the guidelines for creation of standard changes to allow product teams to become self-governing. So that's a little bit about where organization might well be going in ITIL 4, and that's all being finalized at the moment with other things like swarming and other new elements that are coming into service management. And with that, I've beaten the. I did this earlier today, and it actually took me a few minutes more earlier on. So I've beaten that. Sarah, have we got any questions?
Oh, of course we do. So
Okay, that's cool.
we have, so this one is, do you know the name of the ITIL 4 publication and where it's going to be available?
The exact name of the ITIL 4 publication. This is going to sound terrible. Go onto Amazon and Google ITIL 4. I can't remember the exact name. I know it's the foundation publication. What I'll try and do is put the ISBN number out there as afterwards.
Okay. And then, so if you already have the ITIL foundations, that's version 3.
Yeah.
Is it suggested to take 4 foundations for the new information?
Right. Okay. If foundation is all that you've got, then there's 2 routes. Number one, you could go straight in and do the ITIL 4 foundation. But what we've got as well is, and Sarah, 1-2 of the slides in a moment, or a slide in a moment, is what we're calling the foundation bridge. Still means you take the same exam at the end. It's still the 40 questions multiple choice. But what we do with the foundation bridge is, instead of the regular 3-day course, we give you a blended course where you take some of our e-learning that I recorded our e-learning a little bit earlier this in January, actually, not this month. And that's been put together and released in the early part of next week, our e-learning. You do some of the e-learning, and then there's a 1-day course, which is effectively a boot camp, which gives you some key facts and helps you to get through the examination. So you've got 2 choices, really. If you want a more considered view of the thing, then sit back, enjoy the 3 days of a foundation course with some of the top instructors in North America. Or you can do if it's actually, well, I want to get the exam, which is the prerequisite for all of the other education, then what I'll do is I'll come and do it that way, where I'll do a bit of self-paced learning and then just do a 1-day and get me through the exam. So you've got a choice.
Okay. Oh, another question on the transition from 3 to 4. So far, the ITIL 3 foundations testing and certifications, will they be overlapping for like availability?
Yes.
With 4?
Yeah, there will be an overlap. The length of the overlap is yet to be determined. What I think the overlap, the final overlap dates will probably be determined when the next level are released. I think there will be at least between 12 and 18 months as a minimum where the 2 will be running together. I would not be surprised if you could take ITIL 3 courses right the way up, right the way up until the end of 2020. It's not been finalised yet, but if I was a betting man, you might be all the way up to the end of 2020 for ITIL 3 courses.
And then for ITIL 4, are the exams in a similar format as ITIL 3?
The foundation, yes, and the level of questioning exactly the same. So Bloom's 1 and Bloom's 2, which is a definition. So no difference whatsoever. The next level, there's been there's a wide consultation going on around the world at the moment. Indeed, there were a couple of sessions in the US, in Chicago, in New York, and I think one in Canada in January, asking various organisations and practitioners and so on about the level of questioning at the next level. So that's unknown as yet. One thing I can say is that it will be multiple choice still at the next level. What format that takes, I'm not sure at the moment.
Okay. And then so someone was on the GK website and saw the ITIL 4 Foundation Bridge.
Yeah.
Will there be any other bridge courses? And they're looking at certified expert for a bridge
Yeah,
from 3 to
yeah.
4.
Yeah. The other bridge is going to be, that's at the foundation level. The other bridge is going to be the transition bridge, which will be for people who are experts or very, very nearly, that they've only got the managing across the life cycle to take. That's looking like at this stage a 5-day course. So that would be the same as MALC, but that will effectively transition somebody from a V3 expert right the way up into an ITIL 4 managing professional. And as I say, that will be available, probably going to be back end of the summer. If I was a betting man, I'd bet August.
Have cloud services had any change to ITIL process?
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of cloud has had a massive influence on things like DevOps, which has had a massive influence on the way that we do and we look at service management now. So the whole cloud and agile and so on is going to be a topic that runs right through. Writing incident and problem management, as I'm doing in depth at the moment, one of the big sections that we're writing about is how technology is being deployed and can be deployed to support the practices. So that brings in things like cloud, chatbots, AI, machine learning, and so on. So yeah, definitely, there's going to be a big swing towards that sort of cloud service management in the ITIL 4 guidance.